Hollywood has spent decades beating the same three westerns into your skull: The Searchers, High Noon, and Shane. Enough deja vu, right? But what if I told you the most gripping westerns, the ones that actually surprise, shock, or even unsettle, are the ones nobody ever talks about? Are you really a western fan or just recycling movie trivia? Let's dust off the real deal, the classics that slipped through the cracks and are begging to be rediscovered. Ride the High Country, 1962. Here's a western that doesn't just ride into the sunset, it shuffles toward it, battered, wise, and twice as honest as the blockbusters you grew up on. Ride the High Country isn't your grandpa's dime novel shootout. It's Sam Peckinpah's elegy for a generation of gunslingers who realize, too late, that the Wild West has moved on without them. Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea, both weathered enough to look like the West, built them out of saddle leather. Play aging lawmen hired for what sounds like one last easy job, guarding a gold shipment through dangerous mountain country. But easy jobs never stay easy, and what starts as a nostalgia trip turns into a high-stakes game of loyalty, regret, and what it actually means to have a code. Forget one-dimensional white hat, dark black hat cowboys. Scott's Gil Westrom is a charming schemer who wants one last score. McCrea's Steve Judd is the last honest man on the frontier, still clinging to his battered moral compass. Their uneasy alliance is tested when they cross paths with a runaway bride, a gang of reprobate brothers, and a town where violence simmers just under the polite surface. What makes Ride the High Country unforgettable isn't the gunfights, though Peckinpah stages them with ruthless efficiency. It's the sense of loss, men out of time, holding on to dignity as the world leaves them behind. The dialogue crackles with wisdom and weary humor. The landscape is as unforgiving as the choices these men must make. Peckinpah's fingerprints are everywhere: flawed heroes, sudden bursts of violence, and a finale that's as haunting as it is inevitable. The film bombed on release, written off as just another odor. But decades later, it stands tall as the Western's answer to Shakespearean tragedy, raw, real, and impossible to forget. So, you want a Western that's about something? Saddle up for this one. You'll feel every mile. The Shooting, 1966. The 1960s gave us plenty of psychedelic weirdness, but nobody expected a Western this trippy. The Shooting is a fever dream, disguised as a desert thriller, low-budget, cryptic, and more unsettling than most horror movies. If you want a conventional cattle drive, ride on. This is Warren Oates and Jack Nicholson at their strangest. It all starts with a bang, literally. Oates plays Gashade, a drifter haunted by his brother's murder, who's roped into guiding a mysterious woman, Millie Perkins, all icy stares and cryptic demands, across a barren, sun-blasted landscape. She won't say why. She won't say where. She just pays, points, and watches. When a sinister gunslinger played by a pre-superstardom, Jack Nicholson, joins the caravan, things get seriously weird. What's the deal? That's the point. The Shooting refuses to explain itself. The desert becomes a stage for paranoia and obsession. The characters grow more desperate, their motives blur, and the line between hunter and hunted vanishes in a sandstorm of suspicion. Director Monte Hellman stretches a shoestring budget into a stark, dreamlike atmosphere. Imagine waiting for Godot with 6 shooters and existential dread. Every silence feels loaded. Every shadow looks dangerous. The plot coils tighter, but answers stay just out of reach. And then there's the ending, legendary in cult cinema circles for being as maddening as it is unforgettable. Fans still argue about what it all means. Is it a story of vengeance, madness, fate, or is it just the West itself, stripped of glamour and left to rot in the sun? The Shooting tanked on release, only to become a favorite of directors and film geeks everywhere. Quentin Tarantino is a vocal fan. If you like your Westerns unpredictable, ambiguous, and just a little haunted, here's your rabbit hole. Just don't expect to come back with all your questions answered. Day of the Outlaw, 1959. Some Westerns come in sun-baked shades of gold and red. This one is all frozen blue and black. Day of the Outlaw is what happens when you lock a bunch of desperate men in a snowbound town and crank the tension until it snaps. Forget the romantic West. This is as bleak and cold as a midnight blizzard in Wyoming. The setup is deceptively simple. Robert Ryan plays Blaze Starrett, a hard-as-nails rancher with a score to settle. He's ready to kill a rival over a barbed wire feud. Classic Western beef, right? But before anyone can draw, a gang of outlaws storms into town, led by Burl Ives, who trades his Santa Claus smile for pure menace. These are Civil War vets gone bad, and they're not here to negotiate. They want shelter, food, and total control. What unfolds is part standoff, part hostage nightmare. The townspeople are trapped, terrified, and watching the clock. The snow piles up outside, and inside, you can practically taste the fear. Director André de Toth shoots it all in stark, icy black and white, making the landscape itself a villain. Every step outside could mean freezing to death, or worse, facing the outlaws. But here's the twist. The movie isn't just about guns and grit. It's about survival, of the town, of decency, and of the soul. As the situation spirals, Starrett hatches a desperate plan to lure the gang out into the deadly cold, sacrificing himself to save the rest. The last act is a brutal near-silent trek into the wilderness as the outlaws drop one by one. Day of the Outlaw bombed on release, too bleak for its own era. But time has been kind. Today, it's hailed as a precursor to the revisionist Western, and its snowbound intensity feels ahead of its time. Think The Hateful Eight owes it a drink. If you think the West was all sunshine and glory, this one will leave you shivering. The Tall Target, 1951. If you think Westerns are all about tumbleweeds and gunfights, buckle up. The Tall Target is more Hitchcockian thriller than cowboy yarn, and its setting, a night train bound for Baltimore, makes it a genre outlier that's criminally underseen. Dick Powell, best known for his noir work, plays John Kennedy, a New York cop who discovers a plot to assassinate President-elect Abraham Lincoln. His tip-off? A mysterious tall target on a passenger list. Kennedy boards the overnight train, racing against time and shadowy conspirators in a claustrophobic race to prevent a national tragedy. There's no open range here, just cramped train cars, tight corridors, and suspicion lurking in every face. What sets The Tall Target apart is its pacing and atmosphere. Director Anthony Mann squeezes maximum suspense from every narrow space. The train itself feels like a character, rattling, shadowy, and relentless. Every compartment might hide an assassin, and the sense of paranoia grows by the mile. Powell is in his element as the dogged, increasingly desperate detective, forced to navigate not just criminals, but skeptical officials and passengers who have no idea what's at stake. It's a Western by setting and period, but the storytelling is pure thriller. Forget saloon brawls. Here, the action is verbal, psychological, and ever escalating. There are ingenious set pieces, a would-be killer crawling along the roof, a secret code in a Bible, a deadly chase through a sleeping car. The Tall Target slipped under the radar in its day, maybe because it dared to color outside the genre lines. But if you're hungry for a Western that's tense, tight, and as modern as any edge-of-your-seat thriller, this is your ticket. Who needs 6 shooters when you have this much suspense? Olzana's Raid, 1972. If you think all 1970s Westerns went soft, Olzana's Raid is about to knock that idea flat on its back. This is one of the most brutal, challenging, and unflinchingly honest Westerns you'll ever watch. And it's not just violent for violence's sake. It's a deep dive into the very soul of the frontier. Burt Lancaster stars as McIntosh, a hard-bitten army scout tracking the legendary Apache warrior Olzana, who's just led a brutal raid on unsuspecting settlers. Along for the ride is a green lieutenant, Bruce Davison, whose textbook notions of civilized warfare get shredded the minute they set foot on Apache territory. What follows isn't a heroic adventure. It's a grim, methodical manhunt, with every mile exposing just how little the so-called civilized world understands about survival on the edge. Director Robert Aldrich doesn't sugarcoat a thing. The violence is swift, shocking, and never glamorous. Olzana's raids aren't just backdrops for heroics. They're a lesson in how cultures clash, and how understanding your enemy is often the only way to survive. The film dares to show both sides. The Apache driven by desperation and code, the soldiers dogged but hopelessly naive. Lancaster gives one of his best late-career performances. His Macintosh isn't a mythic gunslinger, he's a survivor, haunted, wry, and just a little bit tired of the killing. Davison's lieutenant is the audience's surrogate, watching, learning, and finally forced to choose between old codes and harsh new realities. On release, critics were split. Some called it exploitative, others called it a masterpiece. Today, it stands out as one of the very few westerns that's willing to look the frontier in the face and refuse to blink. If you want a western that's raw, real, and a little bit dangerous, Ulzana's Raid will leave a mark. The Great Silence, 1968. If you think spaghetti westerns are just all about sun-scorched towns and gunmen squinting into the horizon, The Great Silence will freeze that idea solid. This is a western that flips every convention, set in a snowbound hellscape, with a mute gunslinger for a hero, and an ending so bleak it made American studios panic. The story is simple, but the execution is anything but. Jean-Louis Trintignant plays Silence, a man whose throat was cut as a child, and now speaks only through his actions, namely, shooting. He's hired to protect a group of desperate outlaws being hunted by ruthless bounty killers. And if you think ruthless is just another word for villain, wait until you meet Klaus Kinski's Loco, a sadistic psychopath who treats murder like a sport. Director Sergio Corbucci had a bone to pick with the usual good guys win formula. Here, the world is indifferent, the snow is endless, and hope is in short supply. The violence is sudden and shocking, but never gratuitous. It's a force of nature, just like the storms that isolate the town. The great silence of the title isn't just the hero. It's the moral void left when justice fails. And what an ending. Without spoiling because you deserve the shock, let's just say Corbucci's finale was so dark, 20th Century Fox refused to release it in the US for decades. Instead, the film built a cult following in Europe, especially among directors who recognized its radical vision. Quentin Tarantino borrowed more than a little for The Hateful Eight. The Great Silence isn't just a Western, it's an ice-cold slap in the face to anyone who thinks the genre is predictable. The visuals are haunting, the characters unforgettable, and the emotional gut punch lingers long after the credits. If you want to see the Western at its most daring and subversive, don't skip this one. Just be ready for the silence to echo. Track of the Cat, 1954. You want a Western with atmosphere? How about a Western where the biggest villain might be the weather or your own family? Track of the Cat is a genre bender that ditches cowboy cliches for something far stranger and more psychological, all set in a snowbound wilderness that seems to swallow hope whole. Robert Mitchum is at his brooding best as Kurt Bridges, the alpha son of a dysfunctional ranch family. When a panther, the cat of the title, starts killing their cattle, Kurt heads into the frozen wilds to hunt it down. But what should be a straightforward predator versus man plot soon spirals into a claustrophobic study of family resentment, isolation, and secrets that refuse to stay buried. Director William Wellman shoots almost the entire film in icy blues, blacks, and whites, making the color red pop like a wound whenever it appears. It's a visual trick that sets the film apart from every other Western of the 1950s, making the landscape feel both beautiful and menacing. And that panther? More symbol than beast, it might as well be death itself, stalking not just the livestock, but everyone's sanity. Inside the snowbound ranch house, tempers flare, old wounds open, and loyalty is as thin as the ice on the river. Mitchum's performance is pure, rugged bravado, masking deep insecurities, while the supporting cast all simmer with barely concealed loathing. When characters finally step outside, the blizzard seems like a relief compared to the family drama inside. Track of the Cat baffled audiences on release. Was it a horror movie? A family tragedy? A Western at all? The answer is yes, just not in any way audiences expected. Today it's a cult favorite, praised for its ambition, mood, and willingness to break the rules. If you think you know what a Western looks like, try following this cat into the storm. You might not come back the same. Monty Walsh, 1970. Most Westerns want to convince you the West was won by legends, but Monty Walsh says it was quietly lost by ordinary men. This is the elegy of the cowboy, a sad, funny, and deeply human story about aging outlaws who realize their world is vanishing right under their boots. Lee Marvin stars as Monty Walsh, a long-in-the-tooth cowpoke who spent his whole life breaking broncs and living rough. His best friend, Chet aka Jack Palance, is starting to settle down, looking for something that lasts beyond the next cattle drive. But Monty? He's not ready to hang up his spurs, even as the West gets fenced, mechanized, and commercialized into oblivion. The plot is less about gunfights and more about time, how it wears down even the toughest legends. There are still barroom brawls, cattle stampedes, and tragic shootouts, but the real action happens in stolen glances, quiet moments, and half-spoken regrets. Marvin's performance is a masterclass in wounded pride. His Monty is equal parts clown and tragic hero, clinging to dignity as the world leaves him behind. Director William A. Fraker, better known for his cinematography, gives the film a gentle autumnal glow. Every sunset feels like a curtain closing, every laugh like the last one you'll hear. The supporting cast shines, especially Jeanne Moreau as Martine, the French saloon girl who loves Monty, even though she knows he'll never really belong anywhere. Monty Walsh didn't set the box office on fire, too melancholy maybe, for an audience wanting shootouts over heartbreak. But it's exactly that sense of loss and the refusal to sugarcoat the end of an era that makes it unforgettable. If you want a Western with real soul and maybe a lump in your throat, this is the one to watch as the sun goes down. The Hired Hand, 1971. You want to talk about revisionist Westerns? The Hired Hand is where the genre stopped pretending and started feeling. Directed by Peter Fonda at the height of his counterculture fame, this is a Western that's more about regret than revenge, and more about second chances than shootouts. Fonda stars as Harry Collings, a drifter who spent years wandering the frontier with his friend Arch, Warren Oates, always a wild card. One day Harry decides he's had enough. He wants to go home, back to the wife, Verna Bloom, he abandoned 7 years ago. But things don't pick up where he left off. His wife Hannah is tough, wounded, and not interested in being rescued or forgiving. What follows is a Western that moves at the speed of real life, awkward, painful, hopeful, and uncertain. Harry and Arch hire on as ranch hands, doing hard labor in hopes of earning trust and redemption. There's violence, but it's quick, ugly, and never glorified. The real tension comes from the slow thaw between Harry and Hannah, as they try to figure out if love can survive betrayal. Fonda shoots the film like a half-remembered dream, all hazy sunlight and slow fades. The editing is experimental, the soundtrack haunting, and the tone almost elegiac. It's a Western that trades in silences, longing, and the kind of heartbreak you don't see coming. The Hired Hand was mostly ignored on release, too slow and sad for drive-in crowds. But time has been kind. Today it's hailed as a hidden masterpiece, an emotional gut punch that paved the way for modern Westerns that actually care about character. If you're ready for a Western that's about healing more than shooting, give this one a hand. The Mercenary, 1968. If you think spaghetti Westerns can't get any wilder, The Mercenary is here to raise the stakes. This is a movie where a Polish gun for hire, a Mexican revolutionary, and Jack Palance with a gold tooth and a death wish all collide in a revolution so outrageous it makes the good, the bad, and the ugly look like a school play. Franco Nero stars as Sergei Kowalski, a mercenary who will work for anyone with enough silver. He gets hired by Paco, played by Tony Musante, a hot-blooded peasant with delusions of grandeur, to help overthrow a corrupt regime in Mexico. The plan? Turn a ragtag band of farmers into an army and take the revolution on the road. Along the way, they cross paths and swords with Curly by Jack Palance, a villain so over the top he feels like he wandered in from a Bond movie. Director Sergio Corbucci throws subtlety out the window. The violence is explosive, the humor is dark, and the plot twists are so wild you'll have to check your seatbelt. There's a lizard-eating mine owner, a loaded dice trick that'll make you flinch, and enough double crosses to make your head spin. The action is relentless, but there's also a cynical edge. Nobody is ever as pure or as evil as they seem. And let's talk about the style. Ennio Morricone's score is pure adrenaline. The visuals are sun-baked and frenetic, and every showdown crackles with danger. Corbucci's political commentary is sly but sharp. This isn't just a shoot 'em up, It's a commentary on how revolutions eat their own. The Mercenary didn't get much love from critics at the time, maybe because nobody knew what to do with a Western this bonkers. But its legend has grown. Tarantino calls it one of his favorites, and fans of the genre know it's one of the wildest rides in the Zapata subgenre. Want a Western that's as crazy as it is clever? Don't let this one ride past you. 40 Guns, 1957. If you think the Old West was just a boys' club, 40 Guns is here to blow that myth sky high, literally, with a hail of bullets and a woman in command. This is Sam Fuller's wild, widescreen fever dream. A Western where the most dangerous gunslinger rides side saddle and outsmarts every man who dares cross her. Barbara Stanwyck is Jessica Drummond, a land baroness so fierce she controls her own private army, 40 hired guns, all loyal to her and not afraid to show it. In a genre obsessed with lone rangers and silent types, Jessica is a hurricane, powerful, complicated, and absolutely unwilling to play second fiddle. Opposite her is Barry Sullivan's Griff Bonnell, a lawman with a mission to bring one of her men to justice. But nothing goes as planned. Sparks fly, bullets fly, and everyone gets tangled in a web of power, lust, and loyalty. Sam Fuller, never known for playing it safe, cranks the style to 11. There are dizzying camera moves, show-stopping close-ups, and shootouts that feel more like duels of wills than mere gunplay. Stanwyck gives one of her best performances, tough, vulnerable, always a step ahead. Sullivan is great as the dogged lawman, but he knows the real star is the woman in black. What makes 40 Guns unforgettable isn't just its bold style. It's the way it upends every expectation. Women in charge, villains with depth, and a finale that throws the genre rulebook into the fire. European critics hailed it as a genius, while American audiences mostly scratched their heads. Today, it's recognized as a cult classic, beloved by cinephiles for its sheer nerve and its refusal to let the West be a man's world. Ready for a Western that's as bold as it is fun? Take cover. Jessica Drummond is riding through. Chino, 97.3. Sometimes the wildest frontiers aren't marked by six-shooters, but by questions of identity and belonging. Chino is one of those rare Westerns that quietly smashes the genre's boundaries, tackling race, prejudice, and loneliness with more grit than most big-budget epics could muster. Charles Bronson, in peak stoic mode, plays Chino Valdez, a solitary horse trainer of mixed heritage, living on the fringes of a community that wants nothing to do with him. When a young orphan boy wanders onto his land looking for work, Chino reluctantly takes him under his wing, teaching him about horses, survival, and most of all, what it means to be an outsider. What sets Chino apart isn't just the absence of blazing gunfights or outlaw gangs, though there's plenty of tension. It's the quiet, almost meditative pace and the focus on relationships. Bronson's chemistry with the boy is genuine, heartfelt, and never sentimental. And then there's Jill Ireland as Catherine, a rancher's daughter whose growing affection for Chino stirs up the town's deep-seated prejudices. Their forbidden romance is the film's beating heart, full of longing and restraint, made all the more real by the fact that Bronson and Ireland were married in real life. Director John Sturgis, with an uncredited Duilio Coletti, gives the story room to breathe. The landscapes are vast, lonely, and gorgeous, echoing Chino's own isolation. There's action, sure, but it's the emotional battles that stick with you. Chino didn't set box offices on fire. Maybe it was too subtle, too earnest for its own time. But if you're tired of Westerns that only see the world in black and white, this one's worth a closer look. Sometimes the biggest fights are the ones we carry inside. The Tall T, 1957. You want a Western that strips the genre down to its bare bones? The Tall T is survival, suspense, and moral clarity, all packed into a single stagecoach ride that goes straight to hell. Randolph Scott stars as Pat Brennan, a cowboy whose day goes sideways after he loses his horse in a bet. Never trust a bet in the Old West. Looking for a ride, he hitches a lift on a stagecoach with a honeymooning couple, just in time for bandits to hijack the whole operation. These aren't cartoon villains either. Richard Boone's Frank Usher is a bandit with more brains and charisma than most heroes, making the stakes feel real and the choices razor sharp. The tension never lets up. Trapped in a desolate canyon, Brennan has to keep his wits about him as the bandits argue over ransom money, personal codes, and who's likely to crack first. The dialogue is razor sharp, the action quick and ugly, and the mood pure, stripped-down suspense. Director Bud Bodisher doesn't waste a frame. Every line counts, every look matters, and the line between good and evil gets blurrier the longer you watch. What elevates the tall T isn't just the setup, it's the execution. Brennan isn't a superhero. He's a guy with decent instincts and a stubborn streak, fighting to survive and save the lives of his fellow captives. The villains, meanwhile, feel more tragic than monstrous. Their desperation is as real as Brennan's courage. On release, the film was overshadowed by bigger, flashier westerns. But today, it's considered a classic of the Rannoon cycle, a series of tough, lean westerns that rewrote the rules for everyone who came after. Want a western where the bullets feel like they matter? Hop in the coach, you won't forget this ride. The Bravados, 1958. Vengeance is a dish best served cold, and the Bravados is ice cold from start to finish. Gregory Peck plays Jim Douglas, a man driven by revenge after his wife's brutal murder. But in this slow-burning, unexpectedly thoughtful western, the line between justice and obsession is drawn in blood. Douglas arrives in a dusty frontier town just in time to witness the hanging of 4 outlaws. He's convinced they're the ones who destroyed his life, and he's not about to let them escape justice, no matter what the law says. When the outlaws stage a daring breakout, Douglas sets off in relentless pursuit, his fury as relentless as the desert sun. Director Henry King fills the film with stark, sweeping landscapes and a sense of isolation that matches Douglas's internal torment. The supporting cast is a rogues gallery of tough guys, each with their own secrets and agendas. Joan Collins, in a rare Western turn, adds emotional depth as a woman caught between Douglas's rage and her own sense of right and wrong. But the real surprise comes when Douglas's hunt starts to unravel. The closer he gets to his targets, the more he realizes he might not have all the facts, and his single-minded quest for vengeance could destroy more lives than it saves. The film's climax is a gut punch, forcing Douglas and the viewer to confront what happens when you let hate call the shots. The Bravados was overshadowed by other, flashier revenge flicks in its day, but it holds up thanks to Peck's magnetic performance and a script that's unafraid to question the very idea of frontier justice. If you want a Western that makes you think as much as it thrills, saddle up for this one. McCabe and Mrs Miller, 1971. What if I told you one of the greatest Westerns ever made doesn't look, sound, or even feel like a Western? Robert Altman's McCabe and Mrs Miller is a snowbound, mud-soaked, whisper-quiet masterpiece that takes the genre apart and rebuilds it as a story about dreamers, losers, and the cost of building something in a world that doesn't care. Warren Beatty stars as John McCabe, a gambler and small-time hustler who drifts into a ragged mining town with a plan: open a brothel and get rich. He partners with Julie Christie's Mrs. Miller, a sharp, pragmatic madam with a head for business and a heart hidden under layers of armor. Together, they turn the mudhole settlement into a thriving outpost. But their success draws the attention of big corporate interests who don't play by frontier rules. Forget heroics. Altman's vision is foggy, intimate, and oddly poetic. The town is a living, breathing mess, where nobody wears clean clothes and the line between friend and enemy is blurred by snow, whiskey, and ambition. The gunfights, when they come, are clumsy and chaotic, more terrifying for how accidental they feel. Leonard Cohen's mournful soundtrack floats through the movie like a ghost, and the cinematography by Vilmos Zsigmond is nothing short of legendary, each shot layered, dirty, and beautiful. Beatty gives a career-defining performance as a man out of his depth, while Christie is devastating as the businesswoman who knows that hope in the West is a dangerous thing. On release, McCabe and Mrs. Miller puzzled critics and alienated genre purists. But today, it's recognized as one of the boldest, most affecting Westerns ever made. A film that understands the Old West wasn't just about guns, but about dreams, disappointments, and the things we build that never quite last. If you only watch one forgotten Western on this list, make it this one. So, what's your excuse now? 15 forgotten Westerns, each one a shot of pure, unpredictable cinema, far from the tired tumbleweed parade Hollywood keeps replaying. Which of these will you track down first? And did we just shatter your definition of a classic Western? Drop your picks in the comments, hit subscribe, and share this list with someone stuck in a cowboy movie rut. The real frontier is just a play button away. Are you ready to ride?